The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
To Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and thrilled to be here with you on this Wednesday morning. You know, Wednesdays are so exciting here because we have a jam-packed show. And this week, it's the only show that we're doing this week. We have a very special guest who's here with us in the studio that has me very excited. We have a new PA on the show today. I'm not going to give away her name because I didn't ask for permission to do that, but thrilled that she is here with us and has an opportunity to help us out today. And that has me especially excited because my other guests on the show are truly tremendous too. I'm surrounded by fabulous women today. It's a pretty exciting thing. In just a few minutes, we have Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh here with us, and we'll do Ask Dr. Dorene, and she'll answer your questions in real time. Then in our second hour today, Nancy Alspaugh Jackson will join me for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. We've got an amazing guest today who's going to be talking about autism and robotics. This is a growing field. There are very specific reasons why this is so exciting, and so we're going to find out more about that. And of course, we have a lot of in the news as well today. But we like to remind you at the start of the show that this entire program is meant to be interactive. We hope that you will participate. We are now on more sites than ever and on more screens than ever, thanks to our fabulous producer in the booth there, Samantha, who's doing a great job. So she's going to show you some of the different ways that you can connect with us and some of the different ways that you can be watching us live. As you know, for the longest time, we would be live on our website and we'd be live on YouTube, but now we are live on Facebook as well, which is great because one of our ways in which to easily capture your questions has been a little bit hampered. We're still capturing your questions. I want you to know that. And we really have to thank Jesse Powell for the amazing work that he's been doing to get your questions because they were trapped on the internet for a couple of weeks, but Jesse was able to retrieve them. He is minding the store. So if you write in on our homepage, autism-live.com during this next live hour, it's just for this hour. If you write in during that hour, he will be able to capture it and send it to me. But you can also write live on our Facebook and on our YouTube channels. And those you can continue to do 24/7, and we will capture it before the next live show. All right, my friends, I hate to waste any more time because we have limited amounts of time. So it is time for Ask Dr. Dorene.
Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Dorene is an expert in autism.
Dorene Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh.
Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Dorene. Welcome to Ask Dr. Dorene. We have with us Dr. Dorene Granpeesheh. I'm always thrilled to be able to say that to you because she is truly an expert in the field of autism. I believe the preeminent expert in the field of autism. And
thank you, Shannon. Good morning.
Good morning. It's always so great to see you.
Thank you so
much.
And
we're thrilled to have her with us. She's been working in the field of autism for well more than 30 years. And amazing because she's worked with small babies up through senior citizens, everything in between, and not just autism, but the field of related disorders. She is the reason why the Center for Autism and Related Disorders exists. She is the reason why my child got the help and support that he needed because she trained a group of people, and so many people out there get the benefit of what she's been able to do. But on top of that, she's a visionary who helps us to prepare and helps the medical field and insurance to prepare for what's coming could we use her more than now? It's a great time to have her here. But she's going to be answering your questions for the next hour. And we like to remind everybody, though, at the start of the show that there is no expert in any field who could give individual specific advice in this format. So you can write in questions, be as specific as possible, and she's going to give you information around that, but it can't be individual specific. That would be a disservice to the individual.
Right, absolutely.
All right.
Well said.
Good. All right. So I want to get started with a question that we had that came in, if my iPad doesn't fail me now, that came in at the end of last week from a viewer that we've had who's been watching the show for quite a while. She says, I'm a 23-year-old woman with Asperger's syndrome. I also have a rare genetic condition that occurs only in females called Turner syndrome, which causes short stature. I'm 4'10". It's February, which is also Turner Syndrome Awareness Month. Only 2% of the fetuses with Turner syndrome make it to birth, so I am truly a miracle. I'm so grateful that I'm here. God definitely has a plan for my life. Some Turner syndrome girls also have some form of nonverbal learning disorder. I have met some girls with Turner syndrome that also have some form of autism. So there must be some relation between Turner syndrome and autism. And she wants to know, what's the difference between autism and a nonverbal learning disorder, or are they similar? What a great question.
Great question. So Turner syndrome, for those who don't know, is a lack of one X chromosome, and females have two X chromosomes. So basically, that's what it is. I don't think there's much research on all the different things that it affects in terms of development, but let's put that aside, and good for you for overcoming everything that is difficult, that makes processing life a little bit more difficult. So NLD, nonverbal learning disorder, is a term we use. It's not really a diagnostic term.
Okay.
It's just a name we use. And essentially what it is trying to describe, it's sort of a difficult, if you think about what it actually says. It says nonverbal learning disorder. What that means is a person with NLD would have a hard time understanding things that are nonverbal, that are subtle. So, for instance, inferences, reading other people's perceptions, or excuse me, understanding how people feel just by looking at their facial expression, or like understanding, subtle social things. And that's basically referred to as NLD. It is pretty much the same as Asperger's, if you think about it, because individuals with Asperger's have a hard time with dealing with things like, social nuances, abstract social nuances. Now, autism is more pervasive than that. Autism involves a difficulty with understanding basic speech and language. I mean, autism itself is much more pervasive than Asperger's or NLD, because really autism affects all different areas. Like, it will affect our ability to communicate. It does affect your ability to attend to anything, because you're kind of isolated in your own world. Individuals with autism tend to have many more difficulties, let's say. So symptoms, so for instance, they often have what we call self-stimulatory behavior, or repetitive, stereotypical behaviors that are things like lining objects up, repetitively doing a behavior, like turning the lights on and off, or even as severe as things like body rocking or hand flapping. All of those types of things fall under self-stimulatory behaviors, which are not often seen at all with individuals who have Asperger's or NLD. So that's kind of one big difference. Another one is just the level of speech, communication, language. So usually with individuals who have a diagnosis of autism, you're looking at a much more, I guess, advanced delay in speech and language. So, I mean, I have individuals who are nonverbal, and we will teach them how to communicate with a iPad, for instance, or an AUG device. Whereas on the NLD side, you're looking at people who generally have an average speech, They might have a little bit of difficulty understanding pragmatic speech, which is social language.
Okay.
So those are things like, for instance, if I say to you, yeah, I feel just great. You know, there's a certain irony in in the tone of my voice. Sarcasm is one example. Or if I say something like, well, clearly she wasn't feeling well, and you know, the inferences that are nuances that are in social language.
Yes.
Those types of things are a little bit hard for people with NLD to understand. But they understand language, they understand speech, they can communicate everything else. And so, you know, that is a huge difference, because autism is seriously affected by a deficit in speech and language.
So I have a couple of questions here, because
Sure.
it's always very confusing to me. Whenever I would hear about someone who's nonverbal, I would always think, oh, that's somebody who doesn't speak, right? And then, but what I've learned over the last couple of years is it's more complex than that. Is it correct that the actual term nonverbal means that you have no means of communication, which isn't just speech. So you're not pointing, you're not uttering, so that once somebody, I've been told, and the community doesn't go by this, and maybe it's wrong, but somebody had said to me that if you're going by the actual definition of nonverbal, then there's no communication. That communication is more than just speech. Verbal communication is more than just speech. So that once a child technically, or a person, is able to use PECs or something like that, that they're non-speaking, they're non-vocal, but it is still verbal communication when they're trading something for something or pointing to it.
Right.
Is that accurate, or is that just semantics?
No, it's a semantic type of issue that we have in behavior analysis, but let me just maybe try to separate a few things out here.
Okay.
So when we talk about nonverbal, and let's just first make a clear statement that nonverbal is a description. It has nothing to do with nonverbal learning disorder.
Okay.
Zero.
And that's the other thing I was going to ask about.
So
is this
that
is
nonverbal learning disorder, that's why I
is
said
entirely different.
Completely different.
Got it.
Nonverbal learning disorder is talking about people who are verbal, who have a very hard time understanding nonverbal nuances.
Got it.
Okay, it's a completely different.
So that's important. Okay,
very
got it.
separate. Now, individuals who are nonverbal, in behavior analysis, we can separate them. We can say someone is nonverbal or nonvocal.
Okay.
Okay, so non-vocal means that they basically are not expressing themselves vocally.
Okay.
Non-verbal means that they also sort of don't understand any verbalization at all, whether it's receptive or expressive.
Okay.
And it doesn't, so in other words, a person could be, let's say, non-verbal, but could be completely communicating on an OG device.
Right.
Okay. So, you know, because they are communicating, they're not using their sound.
Right.
But they are still communicating. So, but nevertheless, this question, I think, has to do with the very higher level individual.
Yeah.
And this is someone who's barely even on the spectrum. The only commonality they have with this spectrum is the inability to understand those very subtle social nuances that we're referring to. Now, there's many of these are nonverbal. For instance, with the verbal aspect of what I'm saying is one thing, but the satire in it is nonverbal.
Right.
It's intended.
Right.
It's an inference. Or let's say if I talk to you and I don't look at you, that's a nonverbal thing. Eye contact.
All those cues, those social cues that come, that are sometimes it's in the speech, but a lot of times it's in the body language.
It is most of the time in the body language and how we approach things. Like if I suddenly was to sit forward and start, you'd get an impression of either she's angry or she has something very important to say. All that. Those are the nonverbal cues.
Got it.
That an individual with NLD won't pick up on.
Okay, fascinating.
So, and when they don't pick up on it, they also won't display it in their own behavior. So in other words, it's like sometimes you'll see someone with NLD standing real close to you.
Yes.
They don't understand that they're within the bounds of your territory, your personal space. They just don't get that because they don't have that feeling themselves. Those are the differences.
And so would it be safe to say that if we were thinking of this as the old time circle sets, that for people who have Asperger's, it seems like a lot of them
Have an LD.
yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. So the way that I look at it is like autism, right?
Yes.
And then what we used to have pervasive developmental disorder, autism in itself is just very different, broad. Then you have like individuals with Asperger's who they're not really, you can't put, in my mind, Asperger's doesn't exist anymore, by the way. It's a subtype of autism now, but I don't even think it should be. I don't think it's the same type of issue. Individuals with Asperger's do, however, in my mind, have a few more issues with language than people with NLD. NLD, we're talking about individuals who have usually very advanced language, actually. Their language is very sophisticated, and they can write creatively, and they can do all these sorts of things, but their reasoning skills are sometimes affected. It's just because they can't read these social cues. Here's the traditional test for NLD, by the way.
Okay.
The test started out at Yale Child Study Center, and it's a very cool little cartoon. You know how we have for Theory of Mind Deficit, we have the Sally Ann cartoon?
Yes. Yeah.
Which individuals with NLD might have a hard time with as well, by the way.
Okay.
But this cartoon it's three shapes. It's a circle and a square and a triangle, and that's all they are. They're just shapes, all right? And they're moving around each other in a way that if you look at it, if I look at it, Shannon, I can immediately tell that the circle and square are friends because they're playing together, and then the triangle keeps trying to play with them but doesn't, and then the triangle becomes depressed. And then like attempts a few times but then becomes sad, and then eventually I don't remember, the circle or the square go over and like bring the triangle, and then the triangle joins them. Okay, so you and I can easily tell that by the way the shapes move.
Right.
An individual with NLD won't.
Okay.
They can't read things like friendship, sadness, all this sort of stuff, which is from three nonverbal objects that are just shapes. They can't figure that out, and that's a very subtle thing.
Yes.
So now we talk about basic things like facial expression. A shape doesn't even have facial expression, but there's much more that we as humans read from each other. It's facial expression, it's eye contact, it's tone of voice, it's how we move in relation to each other, it's a million things. And those are the things that NLD people have a hard time with.
This is fascinating for me because I don't think I ever had, I think I had heard this term before, but I don't think I understood in any way, shape, or form what it meant. And you know that people who are familiar with the autism community often speculate. They meet people. I have said before that I meet everyone, and I think that we're all a little bit on the spectrum. We have different symptoms, and so I wait till people reveal to me where on the spectrum are they, because I just assume that we all have our things, right? But there are discussions that people have where they'll look at somebody and they'll go, I've always wondered if this person. But I certainly have met people in my life that I've said, okay, I don't think that they don't qualify for a diagnosis of Asperger's or autism or whatever, but you definitely see that there is a deficit in their ability to read what's happening.
Okay. Yeah,
and I have friends who are like, oh, come on, you don't think that that's Asperger's? And I'm like, no, it's not Asperger's because it's not this and it's not that and da-da-da-da.
Right.
But maybe it's this.
So that's really interesting because see, I always look at because I'm a psychologist first, right?
Yes.
So
you're qualified to diagnose. The rest of us are just speculating.
No, it's just because you spend a lot of time learning how to diagnose, right?
Yeah.
And the diagnosis depends on, as best as we can, identifying a number of symptoms that all cluster together. So for example, and I always use this example because it's kind of an interesting one to me, for something to even have a name, or in the book, right? NLD doesn't. Let's start there.
Okay.
NLD is not a diagnosis. Okay. NLD is a term that people have come to use.
Okay.
Okay. So I could say I have NLD just as much as I could say I have humor. Okay. It's just something we have or don't. Now, with in the things that are in the book, in the diagnostic manual, they are very specifically based on a number of symptoms in each area being there. So like when I talk about alcohol dependence or alcohol abuse, or that was the area I found very interesting, because for two things about it. One is, first of all, you have to have the specific number of symptoms. Why is that? Because unless you have the specific number of symptoms required for each disorder, you're still functional. And nothing is classified as a disorder unless it makes you not functional at work or at home. And that's a very specific thing. It's not, so very, very clear, like for kids, because they don't go to work, it's at school or at home.
Right.
So in other words, with autism, right, you have a series of symptoms, and if these symptoms are even the lowest level, a 1-1, right, they're still present,
right,
and they contribute to you having a hard time in school or at home.
Right.
Okay? So now Asperger's has fewer symptoms and different symptoms than autism. Individuals with Asperger's often don't have a language delay. So, but it's still a form, it's still there, because the belief is that it does make life a lot more difficult for them.
Certainly.
Now, NLD individuals, probably it makes life difficult for them too, but then there's so many other, as you said, Shannon, I agree. I think we all, let's say autism, mainly consists of these repetitive behaviors we have, which I think are mainly have to do with pain or anxiety.
Right.
So
I agree.
So we have pain or anxiety, then we have the communication issues, which I think have more to do with sensory than anything else, right?
Okay.
And then we have all the kind of advanced things that get delayed because of those two things, right? Now, you can have any combination of these things, and there's not a name for every combination. There just isn't, right? That's why we call it a spectrum. There's not a name for someone who has, a very mild social-ish deficit, like mild on the social communication, and severe. There's 9 combinations of autism spectrum disorder.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
there's 3 levels of severity, and they can be applied to these 3, actually 2 areas, so 3 to 6 different types.
Right.
Actually, no, it does still add up to 8 or 9, because
Yeah.
you can have different combinations. So there's a lot of different, none of them have a name.
Right.
But an individual who's very, very delayed in language is going to be very, very different from an individual who's very, very delayed in social.
Yeah.
They're just different. They're extremely different. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So that's the thing. To get back to this, NLD only means you have an issue with those non-verbal cues of the environment. That's
you
what
might
that
still
means.
be like incredibly functional, but you have difficulties with these things.
Oh, thanks for saying that. Okay, now what I think is, and I see this in our kids and in our recovered adults and in a lot of adults that we teach, and in your son as well, they overcome these things because they think about it and they practice and they realize what it is. And so, like, instead of being someone who used to have a hard time with that, they become even better at that because they see it. They like train themselves to, none of us walk around thinking about it. It's funny because, like, okay, so you know how we say girls generally have better intuition, right, than boys? Okay, I don't know why that is. It's probably true, but boys also just don't mind being clueless. Like, it's just part of their persona, right? They're not supposed to read a lot of emotion into everything and try to figure out how people, why don't you just tell me how you feel, right?
Right.
It's a very typical statement from a male, not a very typical statement from a female.
Right. Yeah.
But I think with our kids, what happens is they are that person to begin with, where they can't read it, but then we teach them to pay attention. Like, look at how her face was. Did you see? Was that a sad face or how?
Yeah.
So they get so good at it, and I think that's where Jem is. Jem sometimes points out stuff to you that you didn't notice.
Yeah.
That's because he's become like a little psychologist. He's become like he analyzes things.
Yeah.
I see that in a lot of our kids, that they get to a point where their analysis of others is better than the general population.
And for anybody who feels like, oh, well, you know, that's putting something on them, it's giving them a toolkit. They have the opportunity to use it or not use it. And I see that for my son, when he uses the toolkit, he will say to me things like, if he sees me starting to escalate,
what's up with you?
like, you know, and he'll say to me, I think you need to stop. I think you need to drink something. I think you need to sit down and think about, because this is not the end of the world, Mom. You know,
what a fantastic
he talks me off a ledge.
I mean, what an amazing
yeah,
thing,
it really
right?
is. I always say to him, you are going to make somebody a wonderful boyfriend.
Exactly. And you know what? I feel, you know, all the people at CARD tell me that I use a lot of psychology in my practice in just running the business. And it's true, when you know those things, there's no question you're going to look at someone who's talking to you and understand immediately, oh, this person has a lot of anxiety. What they're saying is probably not exactly what they intend.
Right.
It influences you.
Yes.
So,
but I will say this, that I have seen you use your talents on me and other people, and you do it in such a way that it is not like we don't even notice until afterwards.
And say,
yeah, you don't give us the technical terms.
Yeah.
I think what you're suffering from right now is anxiety, Shannon.
Right.
No, you deal with it in a really subtle way that's really clever.
But just going back to this question, I guess the summary of all that is that if you do have an NLD, or if you feel you have NLD, then you definitely can overcome NLD in a lot of different ways, and it is not something that should hold you back at all in any way. And in fact, there's more and more of it these days.
Yeah, there's information available to you about how to overcome these things, and there's more and more ways that you can get services to have you know, a class or one-on-one support to be able to learn. It's just it's just stuff that needs to be learned. It's not physics. And it's not something where you have to knit something and create something from nothing. It exists already, and then you can know the finer points.
Exactly.
It's pretty fascinating. All right, we should take a break. And then when we come back, we're going to do a follow-up on a question that we had last week, and then we're going to start to get into some of the new questions. So stick with us.
Nobody ever asks a kid with autism, what is it you'd really like to do? At this school, we ask the kids, what is your goal? What is your dream? Exceptional Minds is a vocational training program for young adults on the autism spectrum who want to have careers in computer animation and visual effects. I think young people with autism are totally underestimated.
When you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. They all have different talents, different skills, and what surprised me is that there really are no limits. That if these guys believe that they can do something, they really can.
It's estimated that 90 to 95% of young adults with autism are unemployed or underemployed.
A lot of young adults still live at home. A lot of them suffer from depression and are very isolated from the rest of the world, and the opportunities for them are very limited.
We want to develop careers for our young adults. Our full-time program runs 3 years, at the end of which we have job placement and job coaching. We have a work readiness program. We also have our own in-house studio so that when our students graduate, they can do on-the-job training and work on real projects.
We outsourced about 30-40 shots to the team here. They did fantastic work that we can put into a movie and be proud of it. It's great. I mean, we want to do it again.
The studio is their first step into the professional world, the first step in their new careers as digital artists.
The whole purpose is to get the students out into the real world.
We all have the same dreams. We want significance, dignity, and purpose with our lives. We have an opportunity to give those 3 words to every single student at this school who will actually be able to go out and participate in the dream.
This is my first full-time, full-paying job. I primarily work in After Effects. I learned After Effects at Exceptional Minds. It seemed like a good place for me to fit in because I was interested in animation.
Right from the first day that Nicky set foot in our company, he was producing work for us. We saw what level of professionalism is being instilled in them from the very beginning.
This was the first opportunity where Nicky could combine something he loved to do with something he was really, really good at that could eventually lead to employment.
When we first met Kevin, he was working at a supermarket bagging groceries, and they said he would never amount to anything else.
I work at Stargate Studios, and I'm a junior compositor. I mainly do like rotoscoping right now, and I'm still learning.
I think that you find great talent in the most amazing places. The students at Exceptional Minds have had a fair amount of training to get them ready for the visual effects environment.
If it wasn't for Exceptional Minds, I might still be at the supermarket, and I might be living at my parents' house.
Everything's changed. Nicky has purpose.
It feels like I'm a member of society now.
He's capable of making it on his own.
Once you get inside and you see what's really happening there, you immediately want to be a part of it.
It's the dream factory, you know, the movie business, and if you can connect people with their dreams, then the magic happens.
At Exceptional Minds, we like to say that we are changing lives one frame at a time.
Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Dorene. I want to go to a follow-up for a question that we had last week. We had a mom who had written in about looking advice for her son's anxiety surrounding sleeping and thinking that he disappears when he goes to sleep. She said, I really appreciate you and Dorene taking the time to answer my question on air, especially with me being halfway around the world. The fun thing about the internet is that you're exactly the same distance as anybody else.
Exactly.
Which makes
That's
it really
a nice
cool.
way to say it.
So she says, my son just turned 12 years old and has a diagnosis of autism, ADHD, and learning difficulties. He's very verbal and he's always very interested in the world around him. However, I feel even though he is 12 years old, his real maturity is that of a 7 or 8-year-old. He takes medications for his ADHD, and I'm so bad at names of medications, but Autism. She lists the amount. He also takes out 8 milligrams of melatonin in the evening, along with 2 milligrams of
guanfacine.
Okay.
And tuna.
I'm going to take your word for that. She says he doesn't suffer from seizures or sleep apnea. At home, there is myself, my husband, and son. We have only the one child. Myself and my husband take turns to lie beside him on his bed at night to offer comfort when going to sleep. But he does wake during the night and shouts out for one of us to come back in and lie in his room again. I feel the fact that we leave the room during the night might be making his anxiety worse. The idea from Dr. Dorene on him wearing a band all night is brilliant, and I will definitely, I love it when people recognize your brilliance, because I always say that you're brilliant. And she says, I will definitely be trying it. Would it be better to focus on reducing his anxiety surrounding sleep and then begin withdrawing from his room? And she says, I really appreciate any advice you could give, because we know, and you say this all the time, when one of our kids isn't sleeping, no one is sleeping, and then everybody's ability to cope goes right out the window. I know this firsthand. I air hug, feel for you.
Absolutely. I mean, I think 2 nights ago, I didn't sleep at all, and I was just really exhausted because I don't know, we just had our first retreat for our supervisors, so I didn't have a weekend, so I was just really tired, and then like not having a night's sleep, I was a wreck.
Yeah.
You just sleep is the most important thing. So, so first of all, and you saw my response to this, right? Because I couldn't wait. It was late at night, I think, and I was like, I need to get this info to this parent right away, because I was like, so I emailed you about it, but
I have not shared that with her yet.
Okay, great. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So this is Autism XL is ADHD medication. It is pretty strong. He is on the maximum dose of this, 60 milligrams. He's 12. I don't know how big he is. I assume he is adult size. That is most likely what's causing him anxiety. It's very strange. Sometimes we have ADHD medications are basically stimulating. They're extremely stimulating. They're amphetamines.
Yeah.
And so that is what is causing him, that could be what is causing him anxiety. What I would do, and yes, it is better to focus on reducing his anxiety before withdrawing from his room, but that means you need to start reducing his medication. I would very seriously recommend that you look into doing that, and that you talk to his physician. This is XL, so this is extra long. So that means it's lasting all day long. You have several options. Either you could go to a lower dose, or you could get him off XL, which means it will wear off by the time he's sleeping. I would track whatever it is that you think this medication is doing for him right now. So let's say it's supposed to let him focus, right? Measure that somehow. In other words, give him an activity that requires heavy focus, attention. Get a baseline. So like, let's say a timed activity, such as, doing a basic crossword puzzle, or doing a basic worksheet that has questions on it that are appropriate for him, and time it, and then measure like exactly how many he can respond to now, and do that for like 2 days, and do it a few different activities and get a baseline. It doesn't really matter. The point is not for him to get 100% on this. It's just get his baseline, get his current functioning, and write it down. And then talk to his doctor and get him on a lower dose, or get him off the XL. And probably a lot of people prefer the XL because there's no, like, with ADHD meds, you have like a sudden drop when the medication wears off. So you keep him on the XL, but I would reduce the dosage. I think the next dose is 30 or 40, could be. There's 30 and 20 and 10, I think. Reduce the dosage, and then give him those tests again and see if he actually changed.
Okay.
Because that's really important. And if he did change, if you saw, and wait, because once you get him off the dosage, reduce the dosage, just, retest him a week later. Give him a little bit of time for his body to adjust to the new dose, and then test him. I don't think you'll even see a change in his attention, and I think he'll feel a lot better. Take one of these yourself. I always do that. I always like to test on the kids. It raises your heart pressure. It's just, you feel like your heart is beating. Now, it's funny with anxiety, it's like a lot of actually other things. This is an interesting experiment. Like, anyone who is really kind of sad, okay, just pick yourself up and sit upright, and like really pay attention, like sit upright, and you'll immediately notice that your tiredness or depression or whatever will decrease a little bit. It's the same thing with anxiety. If you feel your heart rate, you start to feel anxious, because you're like, what is that? Like, because that feeling of your heart racing has been associated with other times when you had anxiety. It's the fear response, or fight or flight response, your heart rate goes up. So if with these medications, our pulse is usually faster, our heart rate's stronger, you feel it, and it's speed. So you're kind of like a little bit agitated. And that, most of the time, in fact, anxiety, depression, or anxiety is one of the side effects of this medication.
Okay. And sometimes we don't know
things
that.
like headache or like nausea, all these types of things come with these medications. You have to watch out for them.
And so good for her to be able to know that. And I just want to piggyback on what you were saying about, put your body in the shape of. That's literally the phrase that we use. Because my master's degree is in theater. I used to teach college theater.
There you go.
And we would teach, young freshmen would come in always and go, how do you do the thing where you just make yourself cry on cue on stage? And like, it's some big fascinating mystery kind of thing. And what we would do, and it's a little bit more complicated than this, but what we would say to them is, you put your body in the shape that your body is in when you cry.
Right.
If you put your body in the shape of how you cry, it sets you up, and then you can start to cry.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, on our Thursdays, when we do our mindfulness moment, we covered on the study on the show, the study that they've done recently about taking 2 minutes during your day and putting yourself in a superhero pose.
Mhm.
So you stand with your, hands on your hips and your feet apart and your chin up like you're Superman, and you do that for 2 minutes.
That's
and that your
right.
performance throughout the day, there are 3 different poses that you can do, but I like that one. I do it in the
That's
elevator here
interesting.
sometimes. Your performance on things gets better as a result. Surgeons are doing this now before surgeries.
Really?
Yes,
That is
because
fascinating.
they have shown that it absolutely makes you perform better. 2 minutes.
That's amazing.
So putting your body in the shape of whatever, I just had to piggyback
Yeah.
on that. But great information to know, because it's so frustrating as a parent that you go to the doctor and you get those limited times with the
Yeah.
doctor and they go, take this medication. You look up what symptoms
Yeah.
are, but to know that that particular medicine is likely going to cause anxiety in your child.
Right.
When
And a lot of
anxiety
times-
is the thing you're fighting.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And a lot of times we have anxiety associated with ADHD just because all the meds are causing it. So you just need to really look at that. And please write in again, because I'd really like to see if that starts to help the reduction of anxiety, at which point you need to start fading yourself out.
Okay, we got lots of questions coming in from lots of different people. Somebody wrote in and said, first of all, one of our moms in India wrote in and said, if you change the time of when Dr. Dorene is happening, we are on a time change right here because of daylight savings time, but we still have just over 15 minutes left, because she said, let me know how much time there is left. Just over 15 minutes left of Ask Dr. Dorene. Stella wrote in and said, I've been researching but cannot find the square, the circle, and the triangle. Do you know what it would be called? Do you know what she should search for?
Search for nonverbal learning disorder shapes.
Okay, and we'll try to find it too. And if we find it, we'll post it on our Facebook later on today. And in just a second, we had somebody...
I think the person who designed it last name is Sparrow, Sparrow, I think.
Okay.
I'm just going by memory.
But we'll
now.
try to find it too, and if we find it, we'll post it on Facebook. And now I'm going to open a whole can of worms, because we had somebody who wrote in and said, you cannot recover from autism. Yes, progression in areas of development, but to completely recover is false. So we're going to address that, because I can't not, right? And I so appreciate you writing in, because these are exactly the kinds of things where we tend to sometimes butt heads. And I think if you'll stick around, we're going to go to a commercial. I think if you'll stick around, you'll be warm to the place we're coming from. I'm going to optimistically promise it, and then you can come back at me and say it's my fault later. So don't go away. But first, we have Christina Adams is watching, and
great.
so we want to say hi to Christina and all the other
Hi,
people that are watching.
Christina.
And we are going to show the first segment of Autism and Beyond with Christina Adams. So take a look.
Can you have a life with autism? Absolutely not. Give it up right now. No, that's not true. I'm here to tell you, you can have a life with autism. I have a life with autism, and it's a good one. When you start on this journey, you don't know what's going to happen. You really have no idea. You're kind of in shell shock for the first couple years. It could be as long as 5 years, until you realize I do matter to people. When my son was first diagnosed, I remember thinking I would go anywhere and do anything for him. I didn't even think about it. I just came way at the bottom of the list. However, after a few years passed, I realized if I'm not important anymore, then that means no one's going to be here for him. So how do you have this life with autism? It's not easy. It's never going to be easy, but it can be done. It's really all about support. And support is a word you're going to hear a lot when you deal with the autism power structure. And that means schools, government agencies, social service agencies that can help you. There are things out there that you don't even know exist. So once you start connecting with other parents, you're going to kind of find this treasure chest full of things that only they can help you unlock. But once you get that support, it could be a babysitter coming to your home. It could be a therapist to take your child out and get him into the community. You can either leave the house, do your shopping, go to a farmer's market, do whatever you want to do. And it doesn't matter if it's really only about 5% of your time. As long as it's dedicated to you, that's going to help. It's all about your willingness to find support and your willingness to accept change and your willingness to kind of stick up for yourself, because you're battling for your child and you have to realize you guys are connected. There's a bond between you and your child that can never be broken. And if you're doing well, then your child's going to do well. So finding what you need to be happy, whole, and healthy as a person is a way that you can have a life with autism. And that's important too, because if you have a life with autism, you can also give your child a life too.
Welcome back, and we're so excited. This is a new series that we have with Christina Adams, and we're going to be debuting more of them in the coming weeks. So exciting to have her contributing her wealth of knowledge here on the show, and we want to send a big, warm thank you to her for taking the time. We got to go and spend a lovely day with her.
That's awesome.
At the beach and at her home.
Christina. That's
She's
great.
amazing. And anybody who hasn't read her book, A Real Boy, you're missing it. That's all I can tell you. You must read it.
Absolutely.
She's a lovely writer, and it's a beautiful story of a mom and her son going through a CARD program. It was my Bible in the 6 months before we started at CARD. It really...
and it's also so much more. It's like the experience of autism and so on. It's a great book.
It gave me permission to feel all the things that I was feeling and to move through it and keep going.
Right.
Which was huge, because if you don't know, you don't know.
I remember when it first came out, I gave my mom two books to read. One was this, and one was Let Me Hear Your Voice, which is another classic.
Yes.
And she loved this over that.
Well, of course. I remember saying, see, I just got chills because I remember saying to my mother when I told her that Jem had autism, and she was like, "Oh no!" And she was crying on the phone, and she said, "Oh no, not our baby." And I remember at that point I said to her, I said, "He's exactly who he was yesterday. We just know more about what we're going to do to help him." And then shortly after that, after I'd read A Real Boy, I said, "I'm sending you this book. I want you to read it. This is what we're going to do. You need to get on board because this is exciting."
Oh wow!
And
good for you.
And so she read it and was like, "Okay, then." It had taken her a little while, but she got on board. So great book, and we thank Christina for all of her wisdom. Okay, so before we went to break, I mentioned that we had somebody who wrote in on Facebook who said you cannot recover from autism. Yes, progression in areas of development, but to completely recover is false. And this is, you're not alone in feeling that. And I've talked before on the show that I have individuals, good friends who are on the autism spectrum who tell me they don't like the word recovery. I've pulled back from using the word as often as I do, but I don't pull back from talking about what it is that we're talking about when we say recovery, because that's real. So
absolutely.
Tell us what
I'm
that
never
is.
going to pull back because it's so important to so many people what they have accomplished, and I don't want to detract from that. So I'll respond to this, but I also want to ask a question.
Okay.
And here's my response first. My response is, and it's a great show to have this discussion on, because earlier in the show we talked about diagnosis. And here's the example I'll give you. Someone can drink alcohol. They can drink a whole bottle of vodka every night, and they can get drunk. However, they can be completely functional at home and or at work, and their family isn't necessarily recognizing that as a problem. And at work, they get up, they go to work, they do their job, they come home, they're moving up, nothing is changing. So in that case, this individual would not be diagnosed with alcohol abuse. They just would not receive that diagnosis. If they had before, they would be classified as recovered from that diagnosis because they do not meet the criteria that make them dysfunctional. That's what I was trying to get to earlier when we were talking about this. So a disorder is by definition something that causes disorder. It causes an inability to function in one of our two environments, whether it's home and work or home and school. And if a person has a series of symptoms and they do not meet the needs of the disorder, the criteria of the disorder, they don't have the disorder. It's very simple. So in autism, you must have the specific number of symptoms in each area, which is social communication and in repetitive stereotypical behaviors. You could potentially have a serious problem still with social communication. Many people do. But then that would be called social communication disorder. It would no longer classify as autism. Right. You could, for instance, have self-stimulatory types of behaviors, but no social communication delay. In that case, in most cases, that's anxiety. So it's kind of like you have to have these symptoms to have the disorder. So anyone actually who doesn't have all of the symptoms, it could be classified as recovered. Now, what happens with our kids...
If they had it at one time.
If they had it, exactly. So with our kids, well, they start out obviously having all of the symptoms. Over the course of time, we teach them a lot of speech, we teach them a lot of language. They very quickly, that leads to additional social behavior. We develop their social skills. As you know, we work heavily on that. A lot of times we find out the underlying cause for their repetitive behaviors. We eliminate those. And over the course of 4 years, sometimes 5, sometimes 10, as you know, some of our kids are involved with us for a long time. All of those things are gone. They're gone. And now this is an individual who is in normal school without help, and they are functioning great. They have friends. We have many, many, many children like this.
Yes.
They have friends. No one could see this individual and say, oh, there's something really strange at all. Right. In fact, a lot of our children have gone and seen a new psychiatrist, a new psychologist, and the diagnosis has been completely removed because they do not fit the criteria for the diagnosis, and they're functioning great. They're in first, second, third, whatever. I mean, my kids, as I said, my recovered adults are in college. So from my perspective, they have recovered. Now, English is my second language, and it wasn't until many, many years later that someone told me, oh, there's something in the word recovered that gives people the impression that they're coming out of something bad. I don't know. I still don't know that that's true. I still don't really see that. I feel like whatever was, the way that I look at it is you are recovered from having hearing issues when you put in a hearing aid. You are recovered from having visual issues when you wear glasses. Recovery is recovery. It's like, you have overcome a series of things, whether they were medical or environmental or whatever they were, that they don't affect you in any way anymore. So that's why I use the term. There is clearly in my mind, there's no negative associated with the term. In fact, it's positive, because individuals who are diagnosed with autism and then recover, trust me, they go through a lot of work. It's not something that happens overnight. That's why I don't use the word cure, because I feel like they still have whatever it was that caused them, but they learned how to overcome it, and it wasn't an instant cure. It was a period of work, intense, heavy work that they've accomplished, and they are now functioning like the rest of the world. So to me, that's really important, and I see it as a very positive term. So now the question I would like to pose is, they wrote, what was the last sentence? No one ever, or it's not true, it's false? Did they say something like recovering from autism is false?
But to completely recover, what it's written here is, but to completely recovery is false.
I would ask you why. Why do you believe that it is false? Well, I really want to know that, because a lot of times people say that, and we assume different things. I know that some people assume no one can ever overcome all the symptoms. I would disagree with that. I I have individuals who are adults where you could never tell they had any issue at all ever in their lives. And they did, and they were pretty severely affected by it. Some of those individuals are on my recovered video, you know. And on the other hand, sometimes people find a negative connotation with the word recovery, which that I understand completely. But to say that someone never completely recovers is false. I don't agree with that. I would love to ask for elaboration on that.
Okay, and we'll look forward to that. I've been in many discussions about this. We were just talking the other day. I had a friend come with me to the Autism Speaks walk a couple of years ago, and she was helping to work at our booth. And over the years, the way we have languaged autism in our house has changed. Like every couple of years, it changes. When my son was first diagnosed, and I would say to people, "Oh, my son is autistic," and then I hated the way that sounded. That just didn't feel right to me. It just bugged me. And then I watched Holly Robinson Peete on Oprah, and I heard her say, "Well, I don't say he's autistic. I say he has autism because." You know, and that felt better to me. So I started saying my son has autism. And I know a lot of people don't like that. It's like there's two factions, autistic or has autism, and both sides get completely rankles. And I welcome everyone to use the words that they want to use.
They feel comfortable with.
Right. And then when we started at CARD, I felt like it was really important for us to make positive assumptive words. So I used to say to people all the time, my son Jem is actively recovering from autism.
Yeah.
Because every day that's what we were doing. He was actively recovering from autism. And then we got to a point where enough people said to me, that's offensive to me, adults who are on the spectrum. They said, it makes me feel like you think that I'm leprosy. And I was like, oh, I don't feel that way at all. And if that really hurts your feelings, I won't say that. Jem says now to people, he says, I had autism when I was a child. That's what Jem says.
I love that.
And I want, since it should be individual driven and not one size fits all, you know, that's, and other than the show, I have, you know, he has given me permission on the show to talk about that. But other than the show, if I'm outside this building, I am not allowed to talk about his autism. He talks for himself because that's as it should be. He's 13 and a half, and he worked really hard to have the privilege of being able to communicate that for himself. So our words keep changing with time. And I know parents that through the medical system have gotten to the point where their child no longer qualifies for services because they no longer qualify for an autism spectrum disorder. And what the doctors stamped it was autism in remission. We're always dancing around the R words, which I find really interesting. And when I've told
remission
friends,
also I have a bigger problem with, because remission implies that there's a chance that it could come back.
And that is why they're calling it that, because they think that it might. They think that it might, or that you might need services down the road. And so that's why. I have friends who are on the spectrum who are like, remission is all, you're making it sound like a disease. And I do think that that's part of the emotional thing of it, is that the connotation is that we're saying that it's something bad. But for me, how can we exist on a space where we say it's a disorder, right? But it's not bad, right? Like, how can these two things exist? And what I've started saying is, for myself, is the disabling aspects of autism, that my son has, I believe, almost completely recovered from not from autism, but from the disabling aspects of autism. He still has all the things that his brain does differently because of autism. He still has that, but there aren't things that are gumming it up.
Absolutely.
So
I think it's just really important for us to be very clear that there's no negative connotation when we say recovered.
And there's no negative connotation when we're talking about
overcoming it.
People who have those symptoms either.
Oh,
but if it's preventing them from being able to do something, then let's help them. I think that's the focus always.
If they would like the help. I mean, I often tell parents also, it's completely up to you. Because, you know, as a child, the parent is the one making the decisions, obviously. And I often tell parents, it is your decision which direction your child will go. But if you commit to this, then this is a pretty intensive program for the next 3 or 4 years, at least. And it's really a lot of work. Don't get involved with this unless you're willing to commit to this, because it will it could become a negative experience if you do it kind of halfway.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. They're telling me that you have to go.
Unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately. But we thank you so much for this.
Thank you
thank
very
all
much.
of you for the discussion. And we'll continue this next week. And we're going to take a break. And then it's time for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Thank you to Dr.
Thank you
Grant-Pichet.
so much.
Stick with us.
Hi everyone, welcome back. For the month of February, I thought it'd be a great idea to work on an activity that would help your kiddos identify and label emotions. And to help me out today is my good friend, Jamie.
Hey, Suzanne.
Hey there, Jamie.
Hey, how can I help?
Well, the way you can help me out is that because you're a sock puppet, you can do things with your face that I cannot do.
No way.
Totally. The way you can do it is that, you have interchangeable features, which means you can make super exaggerated faces, which makes it easier for kiddos to identify them and to label them.
Uh-huh.
Hey, I have a favor to ask you.
Yeah?
Can you help us out and show us some of your faces you can make?
Of course. Here we go.
Ooh, you look super mad.
I was super mad.
Can you show us another one?
Sure.
Ooh, you look super sad.
I was super sad.
All right, can you show us one more?
One more.
All right. You look super excited.
I was super excited.
I am too. You know why? Because I really want to show everyone how to make a little buddy like you. So let's get started. The materials you'll be needing are googly eyes, felt, a hot glue gun, imagination, scissors, Velcro, some heavy cardstock, and a clean sock. All right, let's get to it. So the first thing you want to do is you're going to grab your sock. Hopefully it's not dirty and used. It's a clean one. And what you're going to do is that you're going to take your sock, fold it in half like so, and then you're going to take your scissors and cut down. The reason we're doing this is that we're going to make an area for the mouth. The next thing you want to do is you want to trim the inside a little bit, because if you don't, it's going to have an overbite. So I'm just going to take my scissors and just trim a little bit off, not much. Now that this guy is ready, I'm going to take a hard cardstock or note card or whatever you have that's a piece of paper. I'm going to fold it in half. And what I'm going to do with this is going to be the inside of its mouth, the kind of reinforcement so you're able to move its mouth around. So I'm going to just cut it into an oval. And don't worry, if it's a little too big, you can always trim it. With this sock puppet project, the materials we'll be using, like the hot glue, is not something for children. So this is something you're going to be doing by yourself and then asking your child to join in once the puppet is ready to go. All right, now that I got that out of the way, let's start gluing. I'm going to take my hot glue gun and I'm going to glue it on the paper. Okay, once I have that, I'm going to put that in the inside of its mouth, and then I'm going to take the sock and then pull it over the edge and cover it with the glue. All right, so now that I have the bottom part done, I'm going to do the same thing to the top. So now that we have this part assembled, what we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of felt and we're going to cover this area so you don't see all the scraggly stuff. So I have my piece of felt right here. I'm going to fold it in half and I'm just going to cut out a similar oval shape. And again, don't worry if it's too big. You can always trim it after we glue it on. I'm going to glue it inside. All right, now we got pretty much the base of the sock puppet. He's got a moving mouth, but wait, he's got no features. We gotta help him out with that. So what I'm gonna do is I have these pieces of Velcro that I bought that are already sticky on the back, which makes my life a lot easier. And I'm gonna peel this off and place it where I want his eyes. So one there and one there. And then I'm also gonna put them also along his mouth. And then if you want to get fancy, you can put some for his eyebrows as well. So now that I have this, we should be making some features for him. I'm alive! Alive! I had a great time with my buddy Jamie, and I hope you did too. Until next time, bye!
Bye! And don't forget to send us your photos at facebook.com/autismlive.
Can you see me? Can you see me flying by your side?
welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh Jackson.
And I'm Shannon Penrod. Thrilled to be here with you.
Thrilled to be here with you too.
You look stunning in black as always.
Thank you.
You always look stunning. You
Thank
just always
you.
know how to put an outfit together.
Well, thank you.
I'm always like rolling out of bed.
I don't know
trying to
about
put it
that.
yeah.
I just noticed schmutz on my jacket, so.
I don't think anybody can see
probably
schmutz
nobody
on
can
your
see
jacket.
it.
You look well and put together.
Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. This is the only day that I'm in this week because I have a special guest who's staying with me, who's being a PA on
Your
the show.
niece, she's such a
but
good
I haven't.
production
I'm not
assistant.
saying her name because I haven't asked her permission to say her
well,
name
she
on
really
the air.
helped me when I came in. She helped me put my IFB on, and she helped me
came
with
in.
my mic.
I'm looking less
You're
shiny.
being
I think 'cause
powdered.
I'm being powdered on
Yeah,
regular. We don't
she's
normally
doing
have a makeup
great job.
artist.
Can we bring her back every week?
I know. Well, I would like that, but
Maybe she
you
could
know,
do our makeup.
she has other
since we don't
places
do,
to go.
Since we don't have professional makeup,
don't.
right?
We don't.
No,
We
our
do it
hair and
ourselves.
makeup is very much ourselves,
It's
right?
totally us.
Yeah.
Which is why I usually look like I stuck my finger in a light socket, and now I look like I've been hit in the head with a tomato. For those of you who don't know what the hair thing is about, because people just think that I'm having a midlife crisis.
Right.
I love how I run
dyeing your
into
hair
people.
orange.
Yeah, I run into people in the ladies' room here, and they're like, "I really like," with big wide eyes, "I really like your hair, what
Yeah.
you're doing."
Yeah,
and I'm
they're
like,
trying
"Yeah,
to be
but you
nice.
know it's for a purpose, right?" And they're like, no. So the purpose of my hair is that we have a new president and we're trying to get on his agenda because, you know, there's lots of things to talk about and lots of things to
Yes.
do. And we want autism to be on his agenda. And we wanted him to know that 2% of the population is on the autism spectrum.
Right.
So we dyed 2% of my hair bright orange. And so it would be something that we would, you know, gather attention. And so I say 2%, you can't ignore it.
And he can't ignore it. and
Well, I don't want him to ignore it. But here's the
want
thing:
him to come
until he has some form of an autism plan, I'm going to leave it until it either grows out or till that happens. But the day after or the day of, as whenever I'm close to the studio again, after he says, "Here's my autism plan,"
Right.
I will cut it right out of my hair, no matter how crazy that looks, and I would like that to happen as soon as possible. So, but we do not yet have an autism plan. And for everybody, I just want to make sure everybody understands that an autism plan, having a vaccine commission, is not what I'm talking about. It's an autism plan for our kids who
But there
already
is no
have autism.
vaccine commission currently.
That is still under discussion, but no, I think that there is a vaccine. As far as I know, RFK Jr. is moving ahead with picking the people who are going to be on the vaccine
I
commission.
didn't hear that announced. I heard that he had a meeting with President Trump, and then the next day, there was a statement from the president's people saying there was no.
What they said, and we covered this on the show because, and we've asked CNN for clarification, and CNN has not answered us. There was an article in CNN that everybody is quoting, but if you read it carefully, the headline says that the Trump staff disavows the vaccine commission. But if you read the article in quotes from the staffer said he had a conversation with RFK about a vaccine commission, but there is still no decision about an autism commission.
Okay.
And a vaccine commission is not the same as an autism commission.
Of course not.
But a lot of people took that to mean that they were still deciding whether to have the vaccine commission. We've had no one corroborate that other than CNN making this false headline. No one from the Trump organization has said, oh yeah, no, what RFK said was false. RFK is still standing by the fact that there is a vaccine commission. But everyone is saying, all these other news sources are now saying that the Trump staffer disavowed it. That's not, if you read the article, that's not actually what happened. I think it's people who don't know that there is a difference between a vaccine commission and an autism commission.
Okay.
But there is. So
you're waiting.
I would like an autism plan.
Right.
And when that happens, I will cut the thing. So there we have it.
There's been a lot of buzz about the confirmation of Betsy DeVos.
Yes. A lot of people not happy about that.
But we don't know exactly what it means for autism.
No, but I think we have right to be concerned about that because she was not entirely up on the whole idea of IDEA, IDEA. And also she is somebody who really wants to encourage people to go take education into their own hands, put the impetus back in the state's hands for the choices that they make. And it all sounds good, right? It sounds like, well, I'd rather have the choice. Of course I'd rather have the choice of where my child goes. Except if you look at historically what has happened as a result of that, what it meant was that all of our kids with autism and with other disorders were at home because the schools did not have to provide them anything, so they didn't. And what people fail to realize is when you put money into charter schools, two things. If you take your child and you put them in a charter school, you have to sign, or a private school, you have to sign away from the public school that you are not going to seek out your IDEA rights. You have to relinquish those. And for some people who don't have monetary means, that's a huge leap. You should not have to give that up if you're seeking another place. You shouldn't, because it's scary to do that. And you wouldn't be asked to do that in any other circumstance. So that's inappropriate. And the other thing, and I kind of lost my little train of thought here, but it's really important to know that when we take kids out of the public school and we put them in the charter school, that takes funding out of the public school. And for people who can't drive to get to it literally comes down to a transportation issue. So the kids who are left there who don't have the means to transport their kids, because when you're in the private school, there's nobody going to transport your kid. That means that those kids are in a school that's going to crumble around their ears. And that's not right. No. That's not the answer.
Okay.
You know, if what we believe in is that all of our kids have the right to a free, appropriate public education, and that's what IDEA lines out. If we firmly believe that, then we can't pillage from those public schools. And, you know, so in that aspect, and it's not just me, everybody I know who's a public school teacher has been up in arms and saying, please don't let Betsy DeVos do this. The people where she supposedly made the difference in her community and in her state with the charter schools, they had kid after kid after kid stand up and say, here's what happened as a result of what she did, and it wasn't good. So, you know, but now she's in.
She's in.
And what that means for all of us is that we have to stay awake, alert, and advocating. And we just don't let things get bad. And it's going to take more energy on our part. If you thought you were fighting the school before, rally it up, girls, because we got stuff on our agenda.
Girls and guys.
Yes, we need the men too, but you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying.
A lot of times it's the moms on the front lines.
Sure it is, especially with the IEPs and
Yeah, and we cannot afford to be asleep at the switch. And it really has to be grassroots. If you see that your school is losing funding, you got to speak up, and we all have to back each other up.
Yeah.
And it may be that you have to, you know, go and stand with a sign in front of a building of a school where your kids don't go to. But you know, so much of what I feel, my mother always used to paraphrase from the poem that was about what happened in Europe in the 30s. And you know what I'm talking about, the poem that says, they came for the butcher and I said nothing. They came for the baker and I said nothing. So when they came for me, no one said anything because there was no one left to say anything. I paraphrase greatly. But you know what I'm talking about.
We have to stand up for others.
We do. We do, because that's standing up for ourselves.
Well, that's what I love about you, your activist streak.
You're the bigger activist.
Well, you know, activist is something we call ourselves at ACT Today, and we call people that help ACT Today. We call them activists, and we give out an activist award every year.
Yes.
So, or several of them. So, yeah, it does take a lot of activism, and
that takes energy.
And sometimes it's tiring.
But it makes a difference.
It makes a huge
It
difference.
has already made a difference.
Sometimes we need a break from it too.
Yes. You can't be 24/7. You can't make yourself sick.
You get burnt out.
And for people who are watching, who are in that phase with your kids, and it can be that your kids are young and you're just starting, or it can be that your kids are having particular issues right now. you get a pass.
Right.
And the rest of us who don't have that situation have to fight all that harder because we know you can't be there.
Right.
And I take that really seriously. There were people who stood up for me when I couldn't see, and that's going to make me emotional.
Yes.
But I want to make sure that anytime I have an opportunity, that I stand up for all those people who cannot.
Yeah.
It's important.
It's very important.
All right, we have in the news.
Yes, we do. So,
do you want to take the good or the bad first? Where
well,
do you want to go?
let's just jump into the bad.
Okay, let's get the bad over with.
The unconscionable.
The unbelievable. But you know what was frightening? When you sent this to me yesterday, I was like, is this the story that we covered about this very same thing a year ago?
No.
Or is this a new one? And it's a new one, which is really upsetting.
Which is about a deputies finding a child with autism locked in a cage in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Yeah, in this town of Jonesboro. They were making a welfare check at a home in Jonesboro about 5 a.m. and they reported that they entered the bedroom. They could smell urine and feces. The child was on a mattress inside a cage. It was one of 4 children. I think I read 2 sets of twins. And it was a 10-year-old child living with 3 other children. And they had the child with autism locked in a cage. And I'd like to say the names of these people because I think, let's just say who they are. Homeowners Mickey Sparks, age 69, and Patricia Laws, age 43, have been arrested and charged with aggravated child abuse and neglect. They're both currently behind bars on a bond of $50,000 each.
And here's the thing about this, right? There's absolutely no wiggle room. This is abuse. It's 100% clear. This is horrifying. And if you have made a choice and accepted the choice to be a caretaker of a child, that comes with certain responsibilities.
Yes.
And this is, you just can't do this. There is a part of me, though, that says, why? Like, you don't just have children and lock them in a cage.
No.
Clearly, there were other things that were going on.
Of course.
And this sounded reasonable to them in some moment. And I'm guessing because at some point, I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who had a child who was not on the spectrum, but the child got up in the middle of the night 3 times and got out of the house and walked down the street at the age of 3. And people, like in a pickup truck one night, picked him up and brought him back to his house. And she was like, what am I going to do? He just gets up and leaves. And so she got a tent. Because she was like, what else do you do? She had locks on her doors. He'd open them.
Right.
She got a tent and she put it around his bed and it had a lock on it.
Right.
It zipped shut and it locked. And I remember saying to her, what are you going to do in a fire?
Right.
And she said, please don't judge me. My child is down the street.
Right. She's trying to keep the child safe.
She was trying to keep him safe.
Right.
But I know that there are people who would be like, you can't lock a child into a tent.
And we've had stories on tethering before.
Yes.
Parents that have had to tether their children that elope.
Because they were like, what am I supposed to do?
Right.
And when they don't know, this is what happens. This kind of stuff is what happens. Now, I've always say on the show, there's 2 types of ignorance. There's the one where you don't know, and there's the one when you didn't bother to find out, that you showed no curiosity.
Right.
And I have absolutely no patience for people who don't bother to find out.
Yeah.
You gotta ask. But the other kind of ignorance is pervasive, and I feel personally responsible for helping people to get to the information so that this kind of crap doesn't happen.
Right.
Horrifying.
Yeah, it is horrifying.
But I want to go into their community and pass out flyers.
Yeah, every year we seem to have these stories, as you point out.
Of course we do.
We have children being locked in a cage.
And it
happened
isn't
here in Southern California not too long ago.
And it isn't just parents. I mean, we covered the story of the teacher who zipped the boy into a duffel bag because she didn't know what to do with him.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, my blood pressure goes up.
I know.
But this is not acceptable. But if you are in circumstances where you feel dire and you don't know what to do and you're at the end of your tether, please reach out. And if you have nobody else to reach out to, my email is s.penrod@autism-live.com.
Mine is Nancy at act-today.org.
And nobody is alone, and children don't get put in cages.
No,
yes.
we can get you help. At Act Today, we give all kinds of devices to help children that elope.
Yes.
We've put up fences for families.
Yes.
We've given them tracking devices.
Yes.
There's
a whole campaign right now at Act Today called Stop. And it's Stop Death by Autism. And because we know that our kids wander,
Right.
and that when you're trying to save a kid's life, sometimes it leads you to do really dumb stuff. This is unbelievably dumb. Don't harm a child trying to make sure that they're safe. There are answers.
Another story on fixations, which is near and dear to my heart because I have a son who is fixated on two things. One, Thomas the Tank Engine, and he's 15 now, and he's still fixated on it. And he's fixated on water, or his stem is water. And we've tried and tried and tried to expand those fixations, to extinguish those fixations, to no avail.
Yeah. And there's a study that's out that says that the fixations may be beneficial. That they're saying that parents and teachers might want to consider embracing the preferred interests of those with autism, pointing out that such aptitudes can be calming and form a basis for their careers.
They're talking generally more things like areas of interest, like computers. They said individuals on the spectrum may often display intense interest in topics like computers, animals, or trains. So this isn't talking about stimulatory behavior, I don't think.
Well, it's talking about whatever they, it's a fine line because sometimes what somebody stims on is what their perseveration is.
Yes.
And so when I think about, see, I feel like you've already done this.
Yes, I've done it with painting.
Yes, because because I don't even think, but I don't know, you would know better, but I don't think that Wyatt's perseveration is with water. I think that his perseveration is the colors that he sees when you splash water.
I think it is too. He tells me he sees colors.
Yeah, and so it's fascinating to watch Wyatt paint. Because Wyatt is a brilliant painter.
He is, yes.
And what they did was all of you, your team, and you and your husband gave him an opportunity to take that need to splash and see those colors, and he paints every morning and every night.
Yes, he does.
And he has his bowl of water, and he puts the colors in, and he does color studies. And before he paints, it's really kind of brilliant.
It is. It's very interesting to watch.
Splashes.
And the way he combines the colors on the canvas or the cartons that he paints.
He is. I mean, I'm like. If you said to me, Shannon, you have to paint every night and every morning, I'd go, oh, goody. And I would do it for 2 days, and I'd be like, I don't have time to paint today.
And he never stops.
No, but you see him splash the paint, and he pays particular attention to the colors and stuff. And I'm always on the phone with you at night, and I hear the conversations. Nancy will be talking to me. We'll talk about something on the show, and then I hear Wyatt in the background. I go, Mom, what color would you call this? And you would say, I don't know, that's like a robin's egg blue. And I always say that we need to get the Pantone things for him, so that, but I think that I kind of got away from that because I think part of it is the dance that you guys do.
Yeah, it's the connection with me.
Yes. And then you guys, talk about, okay, is this color this? And he picks, like, I was talking to him about why he picks which color, because he does a study in a particular color. Before he'll go to do a painting, you have... It's fascinating how your house is because you have a young painter in your house.
I do.
And I don't, right? And so
you
the way
have a
you're...
computer.
Yeah, I have a computer programmer, so our worlds are so different. But it's fascinating to me because you save all kinds of things so that he can paint on them. Because if she didn't, you'd be canvassed out of your house by now.
Exactly. We call him an echo artist because he paints cartons and things. I'd be curious to know parents out there that have children that have had a stimulatory or perturbative behavior that they've channeled into other things. We've covered, the brilliant drummer, Logan Shephard, who apparently
who had a stim. He would do this, and they turned it into drumming.
They put drumsticks in his hand.
And he's, oh my gosh, he's 15 years old and has drum people sponsoring him. His life is sponsored.
His
at
life
15.
is sponsored at 15. Okay, that's pretty amazing.
That you're pretty much. If you're at the point where your expertise is so good that someone sponsors you and wants to put their logo on the stuff that you have, you're pretty cool. And he's that at 15. What's he going to do at 18?
I don't
know.
That's
what I want to know. But also, I mean, when we think about it, you're getting ready this summer to do an art show for Wyatt stuff. And believe me, Wyatt, and I said you named him right, because doesn't Wyatt Jackson sound like a painter?
It does. Yeah.
He's going to be on display at MoCA at some point. But that came about because of a perseverative interest. And I think about Temple Grandin.
And her love of animals.
Well, her love of animals, but she had that plate that she wanted to spin on the end of her bed.
Right.
And she loves to have sand run through her hands.
It was a ring.
It was a metal like
thing?
I call it a plate, but it was like a ring that was on a screw, and she would sit there and spin that, and she loves still to have sand. She goes to the beach and she says she could sit for hours and watch sand go through her hand.
What does she see when she's doing
She
that?
says the colors, and the colors change by the speed. If you go slow or if it's wet or whatever, the colors change, which I think is very similar to what Wyatt is seeing.
Right.
And she said the same thing with spinning the plate, that the color changes. Now, interestingly enough, with Temple, they didn't turn that thing into the thing. They found other things. So it's kind of knowing which thing will transfer.
Right. And wasn't it the pressure that she felt when she put herself in between bars that ended up being her breakthrough discovery about helping animals have humane...
Well, I think, I mean, that helped her, but she always, part of the reason why she discovered that the squish thing helped her was that she wanted, as much as she wasn't interested in taking the perspective of other people, she wanted to take the perspective of the animals at her aunt's ranch. She was like, why does the cow do that? That was the question that she was always asking her. Why does the cow do that? Why, and the aunt would say, well, the cows kind of like it when they're in this small space. Well, why? And so she crawled into the cow squisher to see what the animal felt, and she felt better, and she understood that. So she always would try to get to the level of the dog or the cat or the cat to see what they saw. And then when she went and saw the slaughterhouse, and she was like, you're not seeing it the way they see it. And that was what drove her to want to create it so that visually, and if you look at her designs, that they almost look like a shell.
Yes.
It's designed to put the animal at ease, because what they see tells them it's not a hard thing. They're seeing something that's smooth, so they want to follow it. She understands the cow. So, but the spinning thing never turned into anything that was purposeful. That's purposeful for her, but she still loves it. Anyway, we got off on a tangent.
We did, but it was a very interesting tangent.
Yes.
Let's finish the study here.
Yeah, because we only have 2 minutes, and then we need to get for our guest. So if you want to read more about this, you can read more about it in Disability Scoop, about why these perseverations tend to be something that's calming. We see that with Wyatt.
Right. They said 92% of study participants said their interests provide a calming effect. And of the adults studied, most reported that their interests were not static over time, with 68% saying that they had different preferences as adults as they did as youngsters. About half of those surveyed said their parents were supportive of their intense interest. Only 10% said their teachers are. This highlights an important gap on the educational practices of supporting students on the spectrum, and the potential for incorporating their preferred interests in the classroom.
I see that.
Yeah.
I mean, this year, Jem has a math teacher for the first time who gets him.
Okay.
The first time that we've had a math teacher who gets him. And she started teaching something that it goes with what he was learning about computer animation and coding for animation. And she said, well, so when, transference, it's all over my head. Like, I'm like, ooh, get me a pillow, because I want to put my head in it and scream. But she started talking about something, and he said, oh, it's like when you do this with animation. And they kind of looked at each other and like, stars and flowers and hearts. And it's made such a difference.
Good for him. I'm so glad.
Such a difference.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the teacher, we're out of time.
So
let's talk about our guest.
Yeah, we've got a really interesting guest. Wow, when I read all of her accomplishments here, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. But basically, we have a computer science, neuroscience expert, and I'm going to butcher the name. So I think we're going to wait until.
Let's try at least.
Okay, you want to try?
Dr. Maja Materik.
Okay, I think you did very well.
Let's see.
Very well.
She'll tell me
and
how
she
long
is
I
the
got it.
chair in the computer science department, neuroscience program at University of Southern California. And we're going to find out a lot about robotics and technology with autism.
Which is, a growing field.
Yeah.
All right, so that's coming up right after these messages. Stick with us.
Logan Shephard. At first glance, he looks like a typical American teenager. He plays in a band, loves hanging out with his friends, he doesn't like doing homework, and he's not really fond of broccoli. But Logan Shephard is not your typical 14-year-old. Logan was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. He was nonverbal, made no eye contact, and his parents were told to abandon all hope. Instead, his parents began an intensive intervention treatment. At its center was a quality ABA program known as the CARD method. This is Logan Shephard now.
All I really want to say is, like, I'm kind of copying Martin Luther King. I kind of have a dream, like, that one day, like, I can just, like, inspire people and never give up. Because, like, that's what I want to do in life. Because if I can succeed, they can succeed. And I will succeed.
To follow Logan's musical journey, visit www.facebook.com/officialdrummerrock or @drummerrock on Instagram. For more information on the CARD method, visit www.centerforautism.com or call 800-345-CARD. Rock on, Logan.
Hey everybody, this is Joe Marisi. We're here live in Fullerton, California at the historic Fox Theater. And we're here tonight for the 4th annual comedy show for autism put on by the Fullerton Cares Foundation. And we're just hanging out outside the theater here, and we're going to go talk to some folks right now and see what brought them out tonight.
My name is Larry Hauser. I'm the founder of the Fullerton Cares Autism Foundation, and I'm the one putting on the whole event. That's me and my crew.
Larry, doing this for 4 years, what is it that you like best about this event?
What I like best about this event is there's a lot of people in this area that don't normally go to, like, walks or any, like, stuffy fundraiser events. This is something that those people don't come to, but they want to support. So that's why I really love this particular event, is because of that.
A lot of fun. Now, who do I have the pleasure of speaking with here?
I am the Fullerton School District Board President, and I'm taking a lot of the money from tonight. This is a wonderful event, and we can't wait to have the comedy and raise the money for a worthy cause.
The events, try to help raise money for the events, and seems like I said, Larry seems to do all the work and get the crew going, and he just directs us around, and we try to pick up the cash for him.
Awesome, Brian. And Brian, what is it in your 4 years coming to the event? What is it that you like the most about it?
The comedians. I mean, last year we had a full lineup. This year I think the lineup's going to be even better, and I mean, you can't beat it.
The event is the way that our community comes together, that everybody supports Fullerton Cares and supports the families that are part of Fullerton and that show up and create a really great environment for our kids to grow up in.
I'm actually out here to support my good friend Larry Hauser. Happy to be back and happy to support my buddy.
What I like the best is the amount of people that actually come out and support us and support the cause, because they know it's a good cause, it's a local cause, local charity, and so it's just nice to see the community come together for something that's for the community.
And we are back with our guests now. We are going to be joined here by Maya Matarik, and she is a professor and chair in computer science, the computer science department, neuroscience program, and Department of Pediatrics at the University of Southern California. And she has done extensive research in robotics and technology with those on the spectrum and in autism in general. Maya, welcome to the show. You can't see us, but we can see you. So, all right. So, first of all, we wanted to talk about what technologies, so many children today are diagnosed with autism. How can we provide sufficient personalized care for them, and how can that be enhanced through technology?
So autism is a major challenge today. We still don't understand what causes it. We're still not great at diagnosing it. And then there's the large issue of care, because it is a lifelong challenge for individuals who are on the spectrum. And things have gotten much better, so now there's better insurance coverage and so on. But I think all parents who are experiencing autism in their lives will say that there just isn't enough time, and that there isn't enough coverage, and there aren't enough resources typically for everything that their child needs and deserves. And so I have felt for the last decade and a half that this is something technology should be able to help with. There are numerous technologies coming up today for all kinds of recreational uses. And I just can't help but think that we could be doing much more meaningful things. That is the whole purpose of assistive technologies, and in particular social assistive technologies. So the idea is that we're not trying to say that robots or any other technology can substitute what human therapists do, or in particular what parents do. But no human therapist or parent can be there 24/7. And in fact, every child deserves care, and specialized, personalized care that's appropriate to their developmental stage and their needs, basically 24/7. And so that's the idea, to develop very personalized technologies that can bridge that gap.
Doctor, when we talk to parents about technology, the immediate assumption often is that we're going to go to technology that involves screen time. And a lot of parents are concerned, I think it's something that I'm deeply concerned about, how much screen time my child has and how drawn he is to that. So talk to us a little bit about using technology and screen time, and is this a reason why we would go to robotics, so that we have less screen time? Talk to us a little bit about that.
This is a great question. So I'm a mom of 3, and I'm extremely concerned about screen time. I think there's plenty of solid scientific evidence to show that large exposure to screens, which is what all kids these days are having, there's just too much, right? The amount of 1 hour a day is exceeded by just about everyone who has access to a screen. So large exposure to screens is resulting in decreased social skills. So we can see autism as something that a large number of children are affected by innately, but in fact, when we're looking at the quote typically developing children, they are already showing a decline in social skills. There's a study that shows that 12-year-olds have now the social skills of 8-year-olds, because they're spending so much of their time looking at screens and losing the opportunities to do eye-to-eye contact and social interaction. And those are fundamental in development, not just early development, not just at 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, but all through adolescence. And losing those opportunities by not engaging in those interactions is profoundly a problem. And therefore, in autism is kind of the end of the spectrum of this lack of social skills or diminished social skills. What we really don't want is to create more opportunity for children to be in a screen environment and not in the real world social environment. That's why embodied, co-present social robots, which are like you and me, they are social agents, they're peers. That's why they're a very important therapeutic tool in a way that's profoundly different than a screen. And in fact, these days we have neuroscience evidence that shows that if you look at how the brain is activated when a child, or an adult for that matter, is interacting with a screen compared to when they're interacting with a pet, a human, or a robot, it's very different in the sense that there is more brain activation and it's distributed more. So the brain is literally more engaged. And that's what's lacking when we're only spending time with screens. And that's why having a robot, a pet, a human is so profoundly different in an interaction.
Let's talk about robots for a minute. This happens to be an area that you have a lot of background in. You're the author of a popular introductory robotics textbook called the Robotics Primer. It's Primer, right? Not Primer.
Yes.
The Robotics Primer. and you are working currently into research into robotics. That's correct?
Yes, I've been in robotics, for 3 decades. Let's not name years, but yes,
Okay.
I've been doing robotics research for a long time.
So this sounds like something that's out of reach for the average person working with robotics. Is robotics going to be sort of on the cutting edge here, and is it going to be more accessible? Because when I hear robotics, I think, well, that's not something that's accessible for me, and that's not something I could do with my child.
Oh, absolutely not. If I can disagree. In fact, the two places where robotics is really making a headway. So now if you look at, you can't open any popular media without seeing all kinds of articles about robotics. A large focus is on autonomous driving and flying and logistics and delivery, but people are starting to put robots into homes. So in fact, robots will, from the consumer perspective, start to become much more affordable. So that's one area. The other area that I think is actually much more important is a different kind of accessibility. It's the comfort with these devices. And I think as STEM education improves, and it badly needs to improve, this is one of my other missions.
What kind of education?
STEM.
STEM. Explain that to our audience.
So STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, and it is the 21st century set of skills. It is where the jobs are, it is where the need is. So as more kids are being educated in STEM, robotics is being used as a tool from the earliest of grades. In elementary school, even in some preschools, kids are now starting to play with robots, because robots are such a great way to allow kids to play with physical devices and to program without them actually realizing that that's what they're doing. They don't need to think that they're doing engineering. They just need to be solving problems and engaging in an interesting project. And robotics is a great tool for doing that. So I think actually as we're looking at our children, they're much more familiar. They used to today, our teen children are familiar with phones, but I think our kids who are growing up now are becoming much more familiar with robotics. So this accessibility issue is going to be solved from two sides. One, users will be much more comfortable with these devices because they will have learned about them in school. And two, technologies are being developed for use in the home, which are actually affordable. So people are now developing robots that can be brought into the home on the level of the cost of several $100s, not a laptop, not a large piece of consumer electronics, but really, on the order of a few $100s and decreasing significantly and quickly. So I think that's really important. It opens the door across demographics for these technologies.
And if I can just piggyback onto that, when we do a part of the show, Doctor, every holiday season, we do a festival of toys, and we talk about toys that are hot and that are good for our kids. This year in particular, we saw a trend in toys, affordable toys for families that really capitalize on this. This is how different the world is right now. Fisher-Price has something called a Caterpillar that's out, that's for ages 3 through 5. And it is literally a caterpillar that has different parts to the body, and depending on how you attach the body, it codes to the caterpillar to go in a circle or to go different directions or to do different things. And so the kids it's the beginning of snap circuit coding to do that. And then for the older kids, I know my son had gotten really excited last year at a maker's fair. There's something called an Ozbot. It's a little round toy, and they have pens, and they draw different colors on a piece of paper on a path, and the Ozbot reads the color and then decides what to do. So if they put red, it turns around or goes left. It really, and these things are like $50 and less.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So it's important to familiarize children with these things, specifically for their futures, and it's particularly relevant. It's relevant to all children today, but it's very relevant to kids on the spectrum, because many children on the spectrum are actually very talented for science, technology, and engineering and math. And so this creates a really, not just a future and a career path for them, but it creates a tremendous future where they're not just competitive, but they could be in a leadership position because they have a natural propensity often for these kinds of careers. And in fact, we do know that the instance of engineers in the family of children with autism is disproportionately high. It's something like 6-fold relative to the general population. So
Can you talk a little?
The point is just it should be seen as a tremendous asset and an opportunity.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about some of the research you're doing with robots and how that's going to be assisting our kids on the spectrum?
Right. So for the last 15 years, we have actually done research specifically with families with autism. So everything that we do is user, not just inspired, but user driven. So not all research necessarily works this way, but my lab definitely does. So we have worked with Children's Hospital Los Angeles and the Boone Fetter Clinic there for autism. We've also worked with the Help Group. We've worked with just so many different groups where we can get into dialogues with families, and we can actually develop and evaluate our systems with kids with autism. So what we have focused on is the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lack of social skill development opportunities for children with autism. One, many of them have a deficit in social skills, but because they have a deficit, they're exposed to much less interaction and practice. Children with autism don't get as many friends, so they don't have as many opportunities to be social, so they become less and less social. Early on in life, because some of them don't make enough eye contact, they miss out on cues, which are fundamental for learning and development and social interaction. So robots can help with this, because what we have created and what we continue to create are robots that can, for example, track the eye gaze of the child and then engage in an interactive game to encourage the child to make more eye contact, to look at a shared object that's called joint attention, shared attention. Then we have done games that allow kids with autism to do turn taking and practice turn taking with the robot, this timing. The social timing is very tricky, knowing when not to interrupt, knowing when to pause, knowing whose turn it is. There are a lot of social dynamics that are quite complex for children with autism to penetrate. And the nice thing for the robot is that a robot is completely friendly, never tired, never impatient, never leaves the child out, never ostracizes the child, never gets tired, can be totally personalized, can be attentive to the child's mood. So this is a complement to some real life interactions. But ultimately, everything that we're doing towards not just dyadic child-robot interactions, but triadic interactions where it's child-robot and another child, and eventually pulling the robot out. It depends on the sort of the symptom constellation of each individual child. For some children, the robot is very, very important to almost be present as a mediator most of the time. For other children, it can hopefully be a pathway to interactions with other people, not just with the robot.
All of this is so fascinating. And you actually had mentioned to us that coming up, you're going to need some families to give you some feedback. So if somebody lives here in the Los Angeles area and this is exciting to them and they think, okay, I'd like to know more about this and my kid, might be interested in this, how would they get a hold of you, Dr. Materik?
Thank you for that opportunity. Indeed, we are constantly doing actual studies. So for example, right now at USC, we're going to do a study this summer where we're both going to do interviews and collect data from interested parents. And we're also going to give opportunities to children to play with robots. And then we're also going to we're designing robots to leave in the home. And we're recruiting for people who are willing to actually take a robot and interact with it for up to a month in their home. And this is, of course, completely approved by Human Subjects Review at USC and so on. And so people just should email me. And my email address is my first name, Maya, M-A-J-A, @usc.edu. So I'm very easily reached.
I want to be one of the families that has a robot in their home.
Sorry. Yeah, you can. Yeah, just email me.
Okay, I will.
I got the email address wrong. I'm so sorry. There are two different email addresses that you can
go again.
One is my last name, Matarik, M-A-T-A-R-I-C, @usc.edu. And the other one is my first name, Maya, @embodied.me. But it's probably easy if someone just Googles me, M-A-T-A-R-I-C, Matarik. It's basically just me and my mother on the web. Our name is quite rare. So if you just Google me, you will find me, and you'll find my webpage at USC, and you can just email me.
I find this all so fascinating.
I know you do.
It's so exciting to me.
Well, you are a tech geek.
Stop. She teases me about this all the time. I'm tech hopeless, but I'm interested in it.
You're very interested in it.
Because part of it is because I am interested in it, but because my kid is too.
Your son is, yeah.
And
I wish my son was.
Well,
your kid will always be better at it than you are, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But a well-designed tech product is one that anyone can use, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Okay.
Honestly, and I have seen, you know, there was a period of time when your son came over and my son was all about robots. He's
Right.
less about robots now and more about coding because he wants to make the robot
Right,
do.
right.
But he came over and got really into the robot
Did
that
he?
Jem had. Yes, and so your husband called my husband and said, "Where'd you get that robot?"
Oh.
And went and got a similar thing for Wyatt. That's been years ago now.
Okay.
But I think that your child would be more interested in some of these things than you think.
Probably.
Because they're cool.
Yeah, they are cool.
Yeah.
For sure.
Anyway, I just think this is an amazing field, and we recognize that as therapies change and that as we more and more realize that each one of our individuals on the autism spectrum is going to need something individual, and as insurance is more and more saying we're going to pay for less and less, I think robotics is going to play a bigger role, a more essential role, and a beneficial role. So we thank you for working in this field and continuing to break new ground.
Yes, thank you. You're
Thank you.
You're such
Don't
a
hesitate to tell me.
you're so accomplished in this area, and we didn't even get to 1/10 of what your background is. It just goes
Well, you
on
have
and
to
on
come
and
back.
on. You're definitely not a slacker, Dr. Maderick. You're very
Oh, thank you.
all right.
Yeah,
So
I'll go back for the eyes. No
Yeah.
slacking, but
Okay.
I'm happy to talk again anytime.
All right,
Right,
we
thank
definitely
you.
have to have you back.
thank you, Doctor.
All right, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Okay, so we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back. We might have a special guest to introduce, but we might
Oh,
not.
okay.
I'm going to ask
All
and
right.
see if somebody will
Okay.
come in and say hello
All right,
to you.
sounds good.
All right, but stick with us back after these messages.
Hello, fellow activists. In our last segment, we talked about step number 2, educate yourself. Step number 3 is get support. Now, any journey can feel overwhelming if you feel like you're walking it alone. Well, you're far from alone, because with 1 in 50 kids diagnosed with autism today, there are a lot of us out there. Of course, there's always the issue of financial support. Now, there's a handful of organizations out there that offer financial support to families in need. ACT Today, or Autism Care and Treatment Today, is one of them. Visit our website at www.act-today.org to find out more about our grant process. I want to talk about a different kind of support today, emotional support. Now, you can get that from other travelers on this path. Some of the best advice I've ever received is from the moms of other kids with autism who went to school with Wyatt or were involved with programs with him. Then there are the pioneers. These are the families that have gone through this years ago, and there was very little information out there. All of these people seem to have the desire to pay it forward. Now, one of them, Lisa Ackerman, who is one of my mentors, started an organization called TACA, Talk About Curing Autism. She actually took the concept of mentors and support groups and made it available to everybody. You can go to their website, talkaboutcuringautism.org, to find out more. During the first and most difficult year after Wyatt's diagnosis, I wrote an email to close family and friends, letting them know what was going on and the challenges our family was facing, and why we dropped out of sight. I was amazed at the outpouring of love and affection and all the help I received from that email. First, you have to be vulnerable. You can't be afraid to ask. Try this out. Could you cook me a meal? Are you going to the market? Can you pick me up a few things? Could your kids play with my kid and make them feel included? Or can you come over and clean my house? Well, maybe not that last one, except with your best friend. And maybe the best support of all is having someone that listens, and that doesn't cost a dime. So until next time, surround yourself with the loving kindness of others and keep the faith.
And we are
Welcome
back.
I just wanted to talk briefly about the robotics thing, and we had somebody who wrote in and said that they don't live in the LA area, but that their husband is a computer science PhD at a university, and that they would love to help with any robotics studies, and that he teaches robotics too. And I just think this is an area that is so cool. You know, when we were at NASA, and this was my second time going to NASA, the first time I went with my son, and this time we went with Temple Grandin, and you know, I had a discussion with my son about whether he wanted to go, and he said, you know, I said, I'm going to be working and we're going to be filming and everything. And so he decided not to go. And I thought it was a good choice, except for when they took us into the robotics room, which we did not get to see the other time when my son was there. And I'll tell you, just being in there with Temple was amazing. Talk about having perseverative interests.
Yeah.
They had a hand that was, and I've got a picture of it that I'll post either this week or next week. They had a robotic hand that was there and in glass, and you could see all the wires going up because to make the hand be able to do all the things that a hand needs to be able to do if it's robotic. And man, Temple was all about this hand, and it had these very thin little strings, and she was asking, you know, they wanted to show her the big robot that does all the things, and it had this whole dance that it did for her that was programmed just for her, and they were trying to get, and she was like, I want to know about these strings, because what happens when one of those breaks? And they were like, well, you know, we'll find a way to self-repair it later, or whatever the answer was. It was over my head. And they were like, but let's, you know, they had already started the dancing robot and everything. And she was like, no, I want to know. And then the rest of the day into that night with the talk, and I went to dinner with her, and she was like, and she already signed up to work with NASA to solve this problem of what happens when one of these strings breaks in zero gravity.
Right.
And she, I mean, literally the rest of the day, she was like, okay, I'm going to have to strap myself to the table, and was talking as if she was going to be the astronaut. But she was going to solve that problem no matter what.
So she really locked into that.
Oh my gosh. And you know, she could be diverted off of other things and did a speech and did whatever, but I'm telling you, I said to her, I'm going to call you in like a month because I know you're going to have it solved. And she said, I will. And I believe that she will. It's a fascinating thing. And robots, when the dancing robot, the things that it could do, and the reason why NASA's making those, oh, fascinating. I just, I see where it's beneficial. At least introduce your kids to some robotics. Those Ozbot things, if you have a teenager, Wyatt has to come over and we'll play Ozbots.
Okay, sounds
I
good.
guarantee you, because there's an art element to it.
Right.
He'll be into it.
Okay.
He'll be into it. They sell those at Barnes & Noble for
All right.
anybody who's looking. And they're a more expensive toy. It's $50, but your kid learns coding.
Yeah.
You can't put a price on that. Okay. We're almost out of time, but I had other questions and then I turned off of them. Okay, somebody wrote in and said, would really love to have more TACA segments when they used to talk about new interventions or studies. Any chance they will come back? TACA is welcome anytime that they want to. If you're somebody with TACA, I will call Lisa Ackerman and ask her when she can come back. She's super busy like everybody else, and it's hard because our studio is located far from them. And she hates to Skype because she says it's not as good, but I'll just tell her she needs to Skype with us. Somebody loves the emotions puppet, that it's brilliant, and they want to know any tips for a teen girl who's frustrated because no one can understand her expression. She always looks angry. It's that resting you know what face. I have that. People think I'm angry because I'm thinking, and they call it the resting Bubba Witch face is what they call it, right? And she says she's always misunderstood. Taking photos of her, mirroring her doesn't seem to be effective. I will say one of the things that, because they would always ask us to take pictures or video of Jem and show him pictures of himself so he could see his behavior. That never worked for him.
Okay.
Works for other kids, but she sounds the same way. What did work, because he would crash into people. He constantly would crash into people, his classmates and stuff, and he got into second grade and nobody wanted that. We showed him a video of another child exhibiting the same behavior. And then we talked about it. We paused it and said, it was the Educating Peter.
Right.
Those documentaries about the boy who was an inclusive program. It was on HBO. And they had a whole series of them. We showed him Peter in second grade crashing into other people. And we were like, you know, what are the other kids feeling when he does that? That's when he got it, when he saw somebody else do it and had it related back. So you could show her the video, the Temple Grandin movie that shows Temple Grandin being shown the pictures, because she didn't get it either, and see, you know, what is Temple feeling? You know, she doesn't understand why they understand.
Right.
Show her that, or you could make a video that is exactly what you want. We're out of time. But that can be a fascinating thing. Sometimes they need to see it from outside themselves, because when they're looking at pictures of themselves, they're looking at other things.
Right, right.
So, you know, that could work. But try it out and let us know how that happens. We aren't having a show tomorrow. I need to make sure that everybody knows that, but we're back live next week. And on our show next week, we're having the Buzzies.
The Buzzies.
And the inventor of the Buzzies that you guys have been seeing on Facebook and all the other places, a little fidget toy that is revolutionizing stimming.
Yeah.
So that'll be really cool.
Interested in seeing that.
Yeah, me too. I haven't gotten to play with one yet,
No,
but
I
I've
haven't
certainly
either.
seen them, and it's an exciting thing, so we're thrilled about that. All right, we're out of time, but we'll be back next week. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And yourselves a hug from me.
Bye-bye
Bye-bye.
for now.